I got home at 1 a.m. after a long week on the road driving my truck. The house was pitch black. My son was sitting in the laundry room quietly washing clothes by hand. I stared at him and asked, "Where's your mom? Where is everybody?" Without looking up, he whispered, "They went on vacation and left me here alone." I frowned. "Why aren't you using the washing machine? It's the middle of the night. You should be asleep." Then he slowly rolled up his sleeves and pant legs, revealing bruises all over his body. But nothing prepared me for what I found in my wife's bedroom the next morning. If you found your way here today, I'm glad you did. Tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? I'd love to know. This story contains some fictional elements crafted for entertainment and to carry a meaningful message. Names and settings are not drawn from any specific person or place. But what this story has to say, I believe you need to hear. October 15th, 2024. 1:04 in the morning. I turned onto Marshview Lane after 11 hours behind the wheel, and the first thing I noticed was that my house was dark in a way that houses aren't dark when people are sleeping inside them. Sleeping dark is soft. There's a porch light left on, or the blue flicker of a TV someone forgot to turn off, or a bathroom light upstairs because somebody got up for water. This was different. This was the dark of a place that had been emptied out and sealed up and left. No cars in the driveway, no porch light, no bedroom curtain with the warm edge of a reading lamp behind it. Just the house. And from the side yard, one thin line of yellow light under the laundry room door, and the sound of the washing machine running. At 1 in the morning. I sat in the truck for a moment with the engine off. 30 years of driving long haul teaches you to pay attention to things that don't fit the pattern. A load that rides wrong. A gauge that reads a little high. A house that's dark when it shouldn't be. I'd been ignoring small wrong things in that house for a long time. I was done ignoring them. I got out, unlocked the front door, walked to the laundry room. He was at the folding table, a full basket of clothes beside him, working through it with the steady, unhurried movements of someone who had done this alone many, many times before. His back was to me. He didn't hear me come in. "Owen!" He spun around so fast he knocked a shirt off the table. When he saw it was me, two things happened on his face. At once, relief flooded in, and right behind it, panic. "Dad!" His voice came out high and tight. "You weren't supposed to be back until Sunday." I know," I said. "The delivery schedule moved up, I figured, or maybe—" He picked up the fallen shirt, started folding it again, hands working fast. "I was going to have everything put away before you got home. You're not going to be mad, right? I've got it handled." I looked at my son. Really looked the way you don't when you've been telling yourself everything is fine. He was thinner. Not a little thinner, the kind of thin that happens when a person isn't eating enough, or sleeping enough, or being treated like a person enough. His wrists looked like something I could circle with one hand. His face had the careful, braced expression of someone who had learned to manage whatever came through the door. He was 16 years old, and he looked like a man waiting for bad news. "Everyone?" I asked. My voice came out steadier than anything inside me felt right then. He set the shirt down, shrugged with one shoulder, the shrug he'd always used when something was too heavy to lift with both. "They went on a trip. Left Tuesday." "A trip?" "Beach, I think. There's a note on the fridge." It was in Serena's handwriting. 3 lines. That was all. "Family trip. Back Sunday. Cash in the drawer for food. Owen knows where everything is. No, we'll miss you. No call if anything comes up." No acknowledgement that they had left a 15-year-old boy alone in a house for 5 days, like a houseplant that could water itself. Just cash in the drawer. Like leaving instructions for the mail to be held. My chest tightened so hard I had to set my hand flat on the counter to keep it steady. I folded the note once along its crease and slid it into my shirt pocket. Then I walked back to the laundry room. "Go wash your hands," I said. "I'll finish this." Owen stared at me like I'd spoken in a language he didn't recognize. "Dad, it's fine, I only have a few more." "Owen!" I kept my voice the way you keep a truck on ice, slow, even no sudden moves. "Go wash your hands, son. I've got it." He opened his mouth, closed it, set the half-folded shirt on the table. "Okay," he said. "Just that." And he left. I stood at that folding table and finished my son's laundry at 1 in the morning. Every shirt I folded felt like a piece of evidence in a case I didn't have all the facts for yet, but was starting to understand the shape of. When the basket was empty, I turned off the light and sat down on the floor of the laundry room with my back against the wall. Dark, quiet. Just the hum of the dryer finishing its cycle. I thought about every phone call home for the past 3 months. Every time Owen said, "I'm fine," Dad in that voice I'd accepted because I needed to. Every time Serena said he's doing better, and I let myself believe it, because the alternative meant I'd been failing my son from 600 miles away. Something cold and very deliberate finished assembling itself in my chest. I didn't know yet how much I didn't know. That was about to change. But first, I was going to need to see my boy's face in the light. And I was going to need to make him breakfast. 5 o'clock came without me sleeping. I'd been at the kitchen table since 3 with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, watching the window go from black to the gray-purple that comes before sunrise in South Carolina in October. When I heard Owen's door open upstairs, I got up and started cooking. Scrambled eggs with cheddar and green onion, the way Claire used to make them. Owen came down in socks and a sweatshirt hair going sideways and stopped at the bottom of the stairs when he saw me standing at the stove. "You cook," he said. "Occasionally," I said. "Sit down." He sat at the table, not at the counter, not at the far end. Right next to me, the chair that had always been his since he was 3 years old. He looked at the plate I set in front of him the way a person looks at something they're not sure they're allowed to have. "When did you last eat a real meal?" I asked. His jaw went tight. "I eat, Owen. I eat what's left after dinner." He picked up the fork, set it down again. "Sometimes there isn't much left." I put my hand flat on the table. "Tell me about the last 3 months. Not the version where everything's fine. The real one." He looked at his plate for a long moment. Then he took a breath that shook on the way in, and he started talking. "They make me get up at 4, every morning." His voice was low, and even the voice of someone reporting facts, not asking for sympathy. "Clean the floors, the bathrooms, the kitchen. Gloria checks everything. If the stove isn't perfect, she makes me do it over. She stands there and watches and tells me I'm doing it wrong even when I'm not." He picked up the fork and forced himself to eat a bite like he needed something in his stomach to get through what came next. "I cook breakfast. For all 5 of them. And then I eat on the floor. They told me the table is for family. The table is for family." My hand pressed harder against the table surface. My back teeth locked together so tight my jaw ached. "Keep going," I said. "At night they leave laundry for me. Big piles. Sometimes I'm not done until midnight, 1 o'clock. He looked up at me for the first time. "That's why I was still up. Last night. I didn't want you to see it, so I was trying to finish before Sunday." "Owen." My voice broke on his name. I pulled it back. "Look at me." He looked at me. His eyes were dry, the eyes of his tears, somewhere private, and learned to move forward without them. "My birthday," he said quietly. October 14th. I called you on your birthday, I said. I called and Serena said you were asleep. I wasn't asleep. He set the fork down. I was in the backyard, standing outside the kitchen window. A pause. They had a cake, chocolate with raspberry. Gloria said it was a celebration. Devin blew out the candles. His voice dropped to almost nothing. I didn't know what they were celebrating. I figured it probably wasn't me. My eyes burned so hard I had to look at the ceiling. Come here, I said. Dad, I'm fine. Owen, come here right now. He got up from his chair, and I pulled my son into my arms right there in the kitchen. He was too thin, I could feel every rib, and when I held on, he grabbed the back of my shirt with both fists and made a sound I'm never going to forget. Low and wrecked and long held in, the sound of something that had been waiting too long in a too small space. I'm sorry, I said into the top of his head. My voice was completely gone. I'm sorry I didn't see it. I should have seen it. He pressed his forehead against my shoulder, and his whole body shook. We stayed like that until the shaking stopped. When he sat back down, he wiped his face with the back of his hand, rough, practical, his mother's exact gesture. He picked up the fork again. There's one more thing, he said. Tell me. Mom's watch. He looked straight at me. The old one with the inscription. I found it about 2 months ago. He kept his voice steady. In Serena's nightstand, left drawer. I was looking for a pencil she'd borrowed mine. I wasn't snooping. Everything in the kitchen went absolutely still. I recognized it from the photo on your desk, Owen said. The one from your 3rd anniversary. You had it in your hand. He paused. Dad. Why does Serena have Mom's watch? I stood up so fast, my chair scraped across the floor. Show me, I said. Dad. Owen. Show me right now. I took the stairs 2 at a time. Serena's nightstand, left drawer, I pulled it open. There it was, on top of a folded scarf like it was nothing, like it was just an object that belonged there. I picked it up with hands I couldn't keep steady. Opened the case. For our boy. Claire, the watch. Claire had pressed into my palm from a hospital bed. The watch I'd promised to give Owen when he was ready. The one I'd searched this house twice for and finally stopped looking for because looking hurt too much. It hadn't been lost. It had been taken. Deliberately. By someone with a key to my house. Dad. Owen was in the doorway. His face was wet again. That's hers, right? I wasn't wrong. You weren't wrong, I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone standing far away. I closed my hand around the watch, put it in my front shirt pocket, right where I keep the logbook. Why does she have it? Owen asked again, needing the answer to make sense. That I said is what I'm going to find out. To understand what happened in that bedroom and everything that came after, you need to know who I was before any of it. So let me back up. All the way back to a supermarket checkout line in Beaufort, South Carolina in the summer of 1990. My name is Marcus Webb. I'm 56 years old. I've been driving long haul for 30 years, mostly I-95 Maine to Florida, and back, the kind of route that teaches you everything about this country that you can't learn sitting still. I grew up outside of Valdosta, Georgia, in a house where the heat worked sometimes, and the electricity worked most of the time, and my mother worked always. She raised me alone on a cleaning lady's salary, and a stubbornness I have spent my entire adult life being grateful for. I dropped out of high school at 17 to help with the bills. I don't say that for sympathy. I say it because it's the first thing you need to understand about me. I am not a man who expects things to be handed to him. I am a man who checks the load himself before he signs the manifest. I was 22 years old and working as a driver's assistant, riding along, loading and unloading, learning the road from the passenger seat, when I walked into a Piggly Wiggly on a Tuesday afternoon to pick up something for dinner. I had grease on my collar. I always had grease on my collar back then. She was on register 3. 22 years old, dark hair pulled back tight, moving through a line of groceries like she had somewhere more important to be. She didn't look up when I put my items on the belt. "You've got grease on your collar," she said. "Occupational hazard," I said. She looked up then. Brown eyes, direct, the kind that made their mind up about you fast and didn't apologize for it. "What's your occupation?" "Depends on the day," I said. Today I'm the guy hoping you'll tell me your name before I finish unloading this cart." She almost smiled, almost just the corner of her mouth barely there and gone. "Claire. Marcus. You still have grease on your collar, Marcus." "I know," I said. "I was hoping you wouldn't notice." "I notice everything," she said. And she went back to scanning my groceries like she hadn't just rearranged my entire afternoon. Our first date was coffee at a diner on Boundary Street, because neither of us had money for anything else. She ordered black coffee and a slice of coconut pie, and ate every bite without offering me any, which I respected enormously. The community college 2 nights a week after her shifts. She had plans. Specific, written-down, deadline-attached plans. I had never met a woman who talked about the future the way Claire Webb talked about it. Not like a wish, like a construction project. Well, what do you want?" she asked me halfway through the pie. "Not from the menu. From life." "Something real," I said. "Something that lasts." She looked at me over the rim of her coffee cup for a long moment. "That's a long-haul answer. I'm a long-haul kind of guy." "I know," she said. "That's why I said yes to coffee." What I loved about Claire, not her eyes, not her voice, though both of those could stop a room, was the way she stood. Not physically. I mean the way she stood inside her own life. Straight, feet planted. No leaning on anything that wasn't going to hold. She had grown up with less than I had, and she never once talked about it like it was something done to her. It was just the starting point. The first mile marker. Everything after was the route she'd planned herself. The first time she stood on the porch when I left for a run, I almost missed it entirely. It was a Tuesday morning, 8 months after we started dating. I was backing out of her driveway. I was staying there by then, unofficially, and I happened to catch the rearview mirror at the right moment. She was on the porch in her robe with her coffee, and she raised her hand. One slow wave. I almost didn't look. Then I did. And I sat there in that driveway an extra 4 seconds before I pulled out. When I got back 4 days later, I told her, "I looked for you in the mirror this morning." "I know," she said. I could tell. "How?" "Because you didn't pull out until I waved." She took the travel mug out of my hand and refilled it without asking. "You were waiting for it." I hadn't realized I was. But she was right. After that, I always waited. We got married in 1992 at the Beaufort County Courthouse with Ray Kowalski as our witness and a Denny's Grand Slam as our reception. Claire wore a blue dress she'd made herself on a borrowed sewing machine. When I told her she looked beautiful, she said, "I know now, eat your eggs before they get cold." That night, across a sticky diner table, she looked at me with those direct brown eyes and said, "We're going to build something real, Marcus. It's going to take a while, but we're going to build it right." She was right about the first part. And the second. What she couldn't have known, what neither of us could have known that night, was how long the while would turn out to be. and what it would cost us before we got there. Claire and I had a rule we set the night we got married. Sitting in that Denny's booth with bad coffee and honest intentions, we don't bring a child into a life we haven't built yet. Not because we didn't want kids. God, we wanted kids. But we'd both grown up watching what happens when people have children before they have ground under their feet, and we weren't going to do that to anyone we loved. So we made the agreement. We build first. Then we bring somebody into what we've built. What we didn't know was how long the building was going to take. I got my CDL Class A, the heavy stuff, semi-trucks and tankers, and anything over 80,000 pounds. I came home waving the license like I'd just won the lottery. "We're getting there," I told Claire. "We're getting there," she said. She took the license out of my hand and taped it to the refrigerator door right next to her accounting certificate. 2 pieces of paper that represented about 6 years of work between us. "Look at that," she said, stepping back to look at them side by side. "Not bad for a couple of broke kids from Georgia," I said. She turned around and put both arms around my neck and kissed me the way she did when she meant it all the way down to the floor. "Not bad at all," she said against my mouth. We bought the house on Marshview Lane for cash. No mortgage, no bank with a claim on it. Ours outright, the way my mother had always said property ought to be owned. Claire stood in the empty living room the day we got the keys and cried. Not quietly, she pressed both hands over her mouth and cried so hard her shoulders shook, and I stood next to her and let her because I understood exactly what it meant. We had grown up in houses that belonged to other people. We had spent 16 years making sure this one would belong to us. "No mortgage," she kept saying through her hands. "Marcus, no mortgage." "No mortgage," I confirmed. She sat down on the bare hardwood floor right there in the empty living room. Pulled me down next to her. We sat on that floor for a long time with our backs against the wall and the late afternoon light coming in through the windows, and we didn't need to say one word about what we were feeling, because we were both feeling exactly the same thing. Claire opened her alteration shop out of the spare bedroom. Her first week she made $40. She called me from a rest stop in Delaware to tell me, her voice so bright it crackled through the phone. $40, she said. 40 whole dollars, I said. $40 I made sitting at my own sewing machine in my own house on my own time. I could hear her grinning. "Marcus, do you understand how that feels?" "Yeah," I said. "I really think I do." She made dinner reservations at an actual restaurant that Friday. We split a bottle of wine, and she talked about expanding, about a proper storefront someday, about hiring someone to help with alterations. I watched her talk and thought, this woman has been building this exact future since the day I met her. I'm just lucky enough to be part of the blueprint. Then 2005 came. We decided we were ready. We were 37 years old. The house was paid. The business was steady. My roots were regular. We sat at the kitchen table one Sunday morning and Claire said, "I think it's time." And I said, "I think so too." And we smiled at each other across our coffee cups like two people who had no idea what was coming. The first time she lost it at 9 weeks. I was on a run to Richmond. She called me from the hospital bathroom because she didn't want to call from the hospital room. "I'm okay," she said. Her voice was completely flat. "Come home when you can. Don't speed." I drove 8 hours straight and found her on the couch with a blanket and a book she wasn't reading. "Claire," I started. "Not tonight," she said. "Tonight, just sit with me." I sat with her. We watched television without really watching it, and sometime around midnight she fell asleep with her head on my shoulder, and I sat there in the dark and held very still so she could sleep. The second time was 2007. I'd been on the road 10 days. She called me from the hospital, not the bathroom this time, the actual room, which told me how much of her steadiness she'd used up. I drove 8 hours straight again. She was in the kitchen when I got there. No lights. Just sitting in the dark at the kitchen table with her hands folded in front of her. "Claire, don't say you're sorry," she said. Her voice was steady in the specific way that something becomes steady when it's been held together so long it's forgotten how to shake. "I can't hear sorry right now." "Okay," I said. I sat down on the floor next to her chair, not at the table. On the floor, so we were at the same level, because I didn't want to be above her for this conversation. "Tell me something else," she said. "Like what? Anything. Tell me about the road." So I told her about a truck stop outside Roanoke with the best apple pie I'd had since my mother's, and a dog named Chief who lived at a loading dock in Richmond, and knew every regular driver by sight, and a sunrise over the Blue Ridge 3 weeks back that I'd been saving to describe to her, pink and gold and impossibly wide, the kind that makes you understand why people used to think something was watching over them. I talked until the kitchen windows started going gray with early light. Somewhere around 5 in the morning, Claire put her hand on top of mine where it rested on the floor. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay. We try again." Owen Marcus Webb was born on a Thursday morning in March 2008. 7 pounds 4 ounces, eyes screwed shut like he was furious at the entire concept of the world. The nurse put him in my arms, and I fell apart completely. Not quietly, not in a dignified single tear rolling down the cheek way. I'm talking about a 40-year-old man standing in a delivery room in Beaufort, South Carolina, crying so hard, the nurse put her hand on my arm and asked if I needed to sit down. "Marcus Webb," Claire said from the bed. She was pale and exhausted, and more beautiful than anything I'd ever seen in my life. "Are you crying?" "No," I said. "You absolutely are." "I'm not crying." I looked down at this small, furious, perfect boy we had waited 18 years for, and my voice quit working entirely for a moment. I just wasn't ready for him to be real yet. "He's real," Claire said softly. "Yeah." I pressed my cheek against the top of his head. He smelled like something I didn't have a word for. "Yeah, he really is." When Owen was 3, he asked Claire why she called him my partner, instead of what other moms called their kids. "Because we're a team," she told him, settling him in her lap. "Dad drives the road. You and me hold the house. That's our job while he's gone. You understand?" He nodded with the gravity of someone signing an important document. He was 3 years old. "What's the best part of your day?" she asked him. "You," he said. "That's cheating. You're supposed to say something that happened." "You happened today," he said. She laughed so hard, she had to set him down on the floor, and he stood there looking pleased with himself, and I watched both of them from the kitchen doorway and thought, we built this. 18 years, and we built this. For 12 years, we were exactly what Claire had promised we'd be. The last real answer Owen gave at that dinner table to the question about the best part of his day was in 2020. After that, things changed. In ways I still have trouble saying out loud. Summer 2020. Owen was 12. I was pulling a load up I-95 outside of Jacksonville when Claire called. She'd found a lump. The doctor wanted to run more tests. Her voice was steady. Claire's voice was always steady, but I had driven next to that voice for 30 years, and I could hear the thing underneath it. The thing she was holding back specifically, so I wouldn't pull the truck over onto the shoulder of a Florida highway. I pulled over anyway. "I'm coming home," I said. "Marcus, you have a delivery." Claire. A pause. "Okay," she said. Just that one word, and in it I heard everything she'd been holding back for the length of that phone call. I called Ray from the breakdown lane before I even signaled back into traffic. "I need to get off the road," I said. "Claire's sick. I don't know how sick yet, but I need to be home." Ray didn't ask questions. That's the thing about 20 years of friendship, it teaches a man when questions are not what's needed. "I can cover your roots," he said. No preamble, no negotiating, just straight to it. "Ray, I can't ask you to—" "You're not asking. I'm telling." His voice went firm in the way it did when he'd already made up his mind and was just waiting for me to catch up. "She's your wife. Owen's your kid. Get off the road." "I need the income. Dennis and I will figure something out on our end. You go home and you stay there." A brief pause. "That's what people do, Marcus. Now go." I went home. I stayed home for the next 18 months. And I will be grateful to Ray Kowalski for that until the last day I ever drive. The diagnosis was breast cancer stage 2. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, which is medical language for "we have reason to hope, but we are not going to promise you anything." Claire heard the cautious optimism and focused on the optimism. That was her way. She made a treatment schedule and put it on the refrigerator next to my CDL license and her accounting certificate, and she went to her first appointment the way she went to everything, on time, prepared, with a list of questions written down in her neat hand. I went with her to every single one. I caught her one morning about 3 months in, sitting at the kitchen table before 6 with a cup of tea going cold beside her. She was writing on small slips of paper the size of grocery receipts, her handwriting. "What are you doing?" I asked. She looked up. Her face was tired. The treatment had started doing what treatment does, but her eyes were clear. "Writing notes for Owen." "For when?" She held one up so I could read it. "I'm proud of you today." "Mom." My throat closed so fast I had to grip the counter behind me. "For when I can't be here to say it in person," she said. "Claire, don't." She said it gently, not sharply. "It's not sad. It's practical. I'm a practical woman, Marcus. You've known that about me since 1990. How many have you written?" She looked at the stack on the table beside her. 30, maybe 40 slips of paper already. "Enough," she said. "I'm going to keep writing until I can't." I didn't say anything else. I made us both fresh tea and sat across from her and watched her write, and that is one of the most painful and most sacred hours of my life, and I don't have better words for it than that. Claire fought for 14 months. She fought the way she did everything, with discipline and without self-pity. And in the last week, when the fighting was over and she knew it, she went quiet in a way that wasn't defeat. It was just Claire being practical about the one thing she couldn't schedule or plan around. It was a Tuesday. She was having a better day, not good, but better than the days before it, and she asked me to sit on the edge of the bed. She reached into her nightstand drawer and brought out the pocket watch. My grandfather's watch. 3 generations of Webb men had carried it. I'd told Claire about it on our second date. She'd asked me what I owned that I'd never sell, and that watch was the only answer I had. "Claire, you don't have to. Listen to me." Her hand found mine and closed around it, pressing the watch into my palm. Her grip was weaker than it used to be. Her eyes were exactly the same as the day I met her, direct, no time wasted, already 3 sentences ahead of me. "Give this to our boy when he's ready." Not yet. He's not ready yet. But when he is. "I will," I said. My voice was barely there. "Tell him." She stopped, chose her words the way she always had, carefully, like she was paying for each one. "Tell him time is the one thing nobody can steal from him." "I promise." She closed her eyes and let out a long breath. Good. Now tell me about your last route, the one through the mountains. So I talked about the road. I described the stretch of I-81 through the Shenandoah Valley at dusk, the way the light hits the ridgeline. How you can see 4 weather systems at once from up in the cab. I talked until her breathing went slow and even and she was asleep. That was the last real conversation we had. She died on a Thursday morning in March 2021 with Owen and me on either side of the bed and the window light coming in gray and soft. Owen held her hand. He was 12 years old, and he didn't look away, and he didn't make a sound, and I have never in my life been more proud of anyone. The morning I drove again, 6 weeks later, the bills requiring it. Owen stood on the porch in his school clothes, backpack on, watching me. I started the truck, sat there, looked in the rearview mirror. The porch was not empty. Owen was standing there with his hand raised. One slow wave, just like his mother. I sat in that truck for 30 seconds that felt like 10 minutes. Then I pulled out, and I cried the entire length of Marshview Lane and didn't stop until I hit the highway. That night, Owen called me from home. "Did you get there okay, Dad?" "Yeah, buddy, I got there okay." "Good," he said. "I just wanted to make sure." 12 years old, checking on me. I put Claire's watch in her jewelry box when I got home from the funeral. I checked on it every few months the first year. Some nights I'd open the box just to see it there, to know it was waiting for Owen like Claire had asked. It was still there when Serena and I got married. Still there when the Voss family moved in. 6 months after Gloria and Frank arrived, I went to take it out. I'd been thinking about it on a long run, thinking about when the right time would be to give it to Owen, and it was gone. I searched the house twice, blamed myself for moving things during the renovation we'd done on the spare bedroom, blamed the general disorder of 6 people living under one roof. Eventually, I stopped looking because every time I opened that box and saw the empty space, Owen's face did something that took days to recover from. I told myself it was lost. Things get misplaced when a house fills up with people. I was wrong. It hadn't been misplaced. It had been taken out of a dead woman's jewelry box by someone who had calculated that a man distracted by a new marriage and a full house wouldn't look too hard at family. I didn't look hard enough. Not then. By the summer of 2022, 14 months after Claire died, I was back on the road full-time. Not because I wanted to be away from home, because sitting in that house with all of Claire's things and none of Claire was like standing in a room where someone had replaced the air with something that looked exactly like air, but had no oxygen in it. You could stay in there. You just couldn't breathe right. The road was easier. On the road, the job was clear. Drive this load from here to there. Sign the manifest. Check the mirrors. Clock the hours. There were no empty chairs on the road. There were no sewing machines that nobody was using. Here's what nobody tells you about being a widower. It's not the big moments that get you. It's the logistics. Who do you call at 2 in the morning when you've got a flat on I-95, and your whole life you've called your wife? Who do you text when you see something on the road that would have made her laugh? Who keeps track of Owen's dentist appointments, his school forms, his shoes that need replacing when you're somewhere in North Carolina and don't get home until Thursday? Claire kept track of everything. When she was gone, everything stopped being tracked. I did my best. Owen did his best. We managed. But managing is not the same thing as living, and for about a year and a half, managing was the best either of us could do. I met Serena Voss at a community fundraiser in Beaufort in July of 2022. Rotary Club silent auction, the kind of thing Claire and I used to go to together and make quiet jokes about on the drive home. I went alone. I almost didn't go at all. She found me at the drinks table. Mid-30s, put together in a way that looked natural rather than assembled, the kind of woman who walked into a room and made it feel like she'd been invited specifically. "You drove here," she said. Not a question. Her eyes went to my hands, the calluses, the short nails, the permanent grease shadow on my right thumb that 30 years of soap hasn't fully lifted. "Always drive," I said. "Long haul, mostly. My uncle drove long haul for 20 years out of Memphis." She tilted her head just slightly. "He said there's no better education. You see everything from up there, how people live, what they throw away, what they fight to keep." "He's not wrong," I said. "What do you see?" she asked. And she asked it like she genuinely wanted to know. Like my answer mattered to her in a personal way. For 20 minutes, and she listened to every word and asked 3 follow-up questions, each one better than the last. I drove home thinking that's a woman who pays attention. I was right about that. I was wrong about why. The second time I saw her was at a Chamber of Commerce breakfast 6 weeks later. I was at the coffee station when she appeared beside me and set a cup in front of me before I'd touched the carafe. "Black, no sugar," she said. I looked at her. "You remembered." "I pay attention to people." She sat down across from me at the nearest table, easy and unhurried, like the seat had been saved. "It's a habit." I thought it was a generous habit. I thought she was a woman who cared enough about other people to store the small things about them. I thought about Claire saying, "I notice everything across a supermarket checkout belt in 1990, and I felt something I'm not proud of, feeling a small, disloyal relief that someone in the world still noticed things about me." That's the thing about loneliness. It doesn't announce itself. It just quietly lowers your defenses until you don't notice they're down. I told Owen about her in October. He was at the kitchen table with his textbook sophomore year, just started 15, and growing so fast I kept having to look twice. "She seems nice," I said. He didn't look up. "Is she?" "I think so." "You think so, or you know so?" I stood there for a moment looking at my 15-year-old son asking me the question I should have been asking myself. "I'm still getting to know her," I said. "Okay." He turned a page. "Let me know when you know so." He went back to studying. He didn't say he was glad, or that sounded good, or anything that suggested he was looking forward to it. I told myself he was being a teenager. Teenagers are territorial about their surviving parent. I'd read that somewhere. I kept reading the wrong things. What I didn't know then, what I only put together much later, sitting in a truck cab in the dark, with a black notebook in my lap, was that Serena Voss had not found me at that drinks table by accident. Her mother Gloria had identified me 14 months earlier. 2 months after Claire's funeral. A widower with a paid-off house, a steady income, no family nearby, and a teenage son described in Gloria's handwriting as manageable. Serena had been pointed at me like a compass at true north, every event she appeared at, every gathering, every time I turned around at something, and she was already there, already smiling, already knowing my order. I thought it was fate. I thought the universe was doing something kind for once. I was wrong about what it was. I stopped asking the questions I should have asked. And by the time I started asking them again, they had been living in my house for 18 months, and my son had learned to wake up at 4 in the morning. We got married in the spring of 2023. Small ceremony. Ray and Dennis drove up from Savannah. Earl and Betty Morrison came from next door, still smelling like Betty's garden, a few guys from the depot in their good shirts. Owen stood next to me in a borrowed tie and shook Serena's hand at the reception, like he was completing a transaction he hadn't agreed to. I should have paid a lot more attention to that handshake. The night before, I was sitting on the edge of my bed, trying to figure out cufflinks. I owned one pair. Claire had given them to me, and I hadn't worn them since her cousin's wedding in 2015. Owen came in and sat at the foot of the bed, watching me wrestle with them. "You nervous?" he asked. "Little bit," I said. I'm not the one getting married." "Owen, I know, Dad." He looked down at his hands in his lap, quiet for a moment. "I know you're not replacing her. I'm not. That's not what this is." "I know." He picked at a thread on his sleeve. "I just hope she's good to you." He said you, not us. I noticed it registered it the way you register a gauge reading slightly high, and then I filed it under teenagers being teenagers and went back to the cufflinks. That was the wrong place to file it. The ceremony lasted 22 minutes. Serena wore a cream dress and smiled the whole time with her eyes as much as her mouth, which I had always taken as a sign of genuine feeling. The reception was dinner at a restaurant on Bay Street. Good food, good wine. Earl telling a story about the time he chased a raccoon off his roof at 2 a.m. that had everyone laughing. Owen sat at the end of the table and ate his food and was polite to everyone and didn't say much. 3 weeks later, Serena came to me on a Sunday evening with a soft voice and a reasonable case. "Mom's lease is up," she said, "and Dad's knee has been getting worse. The stairs at their apartment are becoming a real problem." "How long are we talking?" I asked. "A few months, just until they find something more suitable." She put her hand over mine on the table. "Marcus, they have nowhere else right now. They're family. Your family too now." I looked at our joined hands. I thought about Owen upstairs doing homework. I thought about the fact that this house had 4 bedrooms and 2 of them were empty. "Okay," I said. "A few months." Gloria and Frank Voss arrived with a moving truck the following Saturday. Darlene came 2 weeks after that, just temporarily while her roommate situation sorts itself out. Devin came with Serena. He'd been staying with Gloria anyway, she explained. It made more sense for him to be here. Just like that, a household of 2 became a household of 6. That first week, Gloria cooked every single night. Real meals, pot roast on Monday, biscuits and gravy. Tuesday, a chicken casserole. Wednesday, that Frank said was her grandmother's recipe. She asked me about my routes, my schedule, whether I preferred my coffee in a mug or a travel cup for early mornings. "You work too hard," she told me one evening, setting a plate in front of me with both hands like she was presenting something ceremonial. "A man your age out on that road all week. You need people looking after you." "I'm fine," I said. "Of course you are." She smiled, warm, patient, the exact temperature of a smile that has been calibrated for maximum effect. "But fine isn't the same as taken care of, is it, Marcus?" I ate every bite and told her it was the best pot roast I'd had in years. She beamed like I'd handed her something she'd been waiting for. I didn't understand then that she was filing everything I said. Every preference, every soft spot, every place where a decent man could be managed if you knew where to press. Every time I came home from a run that fall, the house was warm. Serena at the door. Gloria waving from the kitchen with a dish towel over her shoulder. Dinner ready. Devin at the living room table with textbooks open. The kind of scene you'd use in an advertisement for something wholesome, family values, home cooking, a man who has people waiting for him. "How's Owen?" I'd ask every time first thing. "I'm better every day." Serena would say, warm and easy. "It just takes time with blended families. You know how it is." I believed her. Every single time I walked through that door, I believed her. What I didn't know, what I only learned later, piece by piece, was that Devin had a post at the upstairs window when I was due home. The moment my truck appeared on Marsh View Lane, he'd come to the top of the stairs and say one word. "Coming." And in the time it took me to park and walk to the front door, the entire performance reset. Owen's plate moved from the kitchen floor to the table. The television went to something wholesome. Everyone found their marks. 4 minutes. That's all they needed. Earl Morrison told me later over coffee at his kitchen table that he'd watched it happen through his front window more times than he could count. He'd see the activity through our windows change the moment my truck turned onto the street. He said it looked like a play, starting lights up everyone in position. "I should have come over," Earl said. His voice was rough with it. "I should have knocked on your door a dozen times." "You're here now," I told him. But that was later. That was after. In the fall of 2023, all I knew was that my house felt full in a way that I'd convinced myself was good, and that Owen had started eating his dinner standing at the kitchen counter instead of at the table, and that when I asked why Serena said teenagers needed their space, and I nodded like a man reading a road sign in the wrong language. The temperature was dropping for my son. I just couldn't feel it yet from where I was standing. What I'm about to tell you, I didn't know while it was happening. I'm telling it now because Owen told me piece by piece over weeks the way someone carefully dismantles something that's been held together under pressure for too long. And because Earl Morrison confirmed parts of it with 47 photographs he'd taken through his fence. And because the rest, I figured out myself working backward from the evidence the way you reconstruct a highway accident, from skid marks and debris patterns. I need you to understand that distinction. What you're about to hear is the truth. It's just not the truth I had at the time. They ran the house like a rotation. That's the detail that still sits in my chest, like something swallowed wrong, not the cruelty itself, but the organization of it, the deliberateness. These were not people acting out of temper or thoughtlessness. They had a system. Gloria handled the standards. Every morning before breakfast, she'd walk through the house and find something wrong, a floor Owen had mopped at 4 in the morning that somehow wasn't clean enough, a counter he'd wiped that still had a streak. She'd make him do it again, with her standing there watching. Owen told me she'd narrate while he worked, talking about him in the third person, like he was an appliance that wasn't performing to spec. "The boy doesn't know how to wring a mop properly," she'd say to Serena. "The boy needs to be taught to do things right." Owen was standing 3 feet away when she said it. Every time. Frank handled the quieter damage. At breakfast, the breakfast Owen cooked, and then didn't get to sit down, for Frank would speak loudly enough to carry into the kitchen where Owen was eating on the floor. Your daddy's always on the road," Frank would say, shaking his head with a practiced sadness that Owen said looked almost real. "You ever wonder why he doesn't find a way to come home more?" Owen told me he'd argued back the first few times. "My dad works," he said. "That's what he does. That's how we keep the house." "Sure, sure," Frank would say, easygoing, unhurried. "Long haul pays real good. Nothing wrong with a man who prioritizes his income." "He's not prioritizing." "Course not." Frank would smile like he was agreeing. "I'm sure he thinks about you every mile." Owen stopped arguing eventually. He told me it was like trying to put out a fire by explaining to it why fire was wrong. The fire didn't care about your reasoning. It just covered the outside. She'd been working the neighborhood for months. Owen mentioned things to me later that explained looks I'd gotten from people at the gas station, the hardware store, the parking lot at Publix. Darlene had told at least 6 neighbors that Owen had a stealing problem, that he'd been caught taking things from the Hendersons 2 doors down, that she was worried about him but didn't want to say anything because Marcus was so sensitive about his boy. None of it was true. All of it stuck. Then there was Devin. Devin was 14, 2 years younger than Owen, and he'd been raised inside this operation the way some kids are raised inside a family business. He knew the vocabulary. He knew the tools. He used them with the casual fluency of someone who had never known anything else. Owen fixed his bike one Saturday. Spent most of the afternoon on it. The chain had slipped its housing. The rear brake needed adjusting. The whole thing needed cleaning and oiling. Devon stood there watching, and when it was done, he got on it and rode it down the driveway and came back grinning. "Thanks," Devon said. And Owen told me that thank you sounded real. That for about 10 minutes they were just two kids in a driveway, and he thought maybe there was a version of this that could work. Devon's mother called him inside for dinner. The next morning, Devon walked out to the driveway, picked up the bike, and slammed it onto the concrete. Twice. The front wheel buckled. The chain snapped clean off. Devon looked at Owen and said, "Your piece of junk broke itself." Owen's hands tightened around the edge of the kitchen table when he told me this. His knuckles went white. "And you?" I asked. "I went inside," he said. I didn't let him see me cry. I went to my room and I cried there. He paused. His voice had gone very flat, the voice of someone reporting a fact they've already finished grieving. I didn't try after that. There was no point in trying. When Owen described the midnight laundry, cold water hands going red and stiff working through the pile alone at 1 a.m, I heard Claire's voice as clearly as if she were standing behind me. "Not yet, baby. Your hands are still too small for hard work. That's my job right now. Your job is just to grow up happy." I looked at my son's hands across the kitchen table. 15 years old, knuckles rough, palms starting to callous in the places that callous when you do physical work regularly. His hands weren't small anymore, and he hadn't grown up happy. Not this past year. And I could sit here and put all of that on Gloria and Frank and Serena and Devon, and I would be right to do it. But I'd also be leaving out the part where his father was gone 4 days out of 7 and called home every night and accepted the word of the people running the operation that everything was fine. I am not going to leave that part out. The shift system worked because I was gone. Full stop. And what I still hadn't told you, what I'm almost ashamed to say, is that before I came home early that October night and found Owen in the laundry room, they had already used my absence to turn me against my own son. Not in a dramatic way. In a quiet, incremental, perfectly managed way. That's the part I have to tell you next. Early 2024. I started taking longer routes, staying out longer between runs home. I told myself it was the money, winter rates were good. The holiday freight hadn't fully cleared the system, yet there was work to be had. The real reason was something I couldn't say out loud at the time. Something in that house had started to feel wrong in a way I couldn't name. And when a man can't name what's wrong, he does what he knows how to do. I drove. I put miles between myself and the feeling, and for a few hours at a stretch, it almost worked. It was a Tuesday in February when my phone buzzed at a Flying J outside Savannah. Flying J is a truck stop chain, fuel showers, hot food, the kind of place that exists specifically for people who live on the road and need something that feels almost like a stop. I was at a corner table with a coffee and my logbook when Serena's name came up on the screen. A video. 12 seconds. Owen in the backyard shoving Devon. Devon stumbling backward into the chain-link fence, grabbing his arm, going down on one knee. My coffee went cold. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my ears. I called immediately. "Is Devon okay?" I said the moment Serena picked up. "He's shaken up." Her voice was tight and controlled the voice of a woman managing a difficult situation. "Marcus, this isn't the first time. Owen has been, put Owen on." A pause. Footsteps. Then Owen's voice, careful and flat. "Hey, Dad. What happened out there?" He. Owen stopped. Did you push Devon? The pause before he answered lasted long enough to break something in my chest. Yeah, he said. I did. That is not how I raised you. You understand me? That is not what we do in this family. I know, Owen said. Flat, quiet. The voice of someone who has heard a verdict and is simply waiting for the sentence. We're going to talk about this when I get home. Okay, Dad. I hung up, sat in that Flying J for 30 minutes staring at a logbook I could not bring myself to write in, feeling like the worst father in 4 states. I did not think to ask what happened in the 10 seconds before Devon started filming. When I got home 2 days later, I sat Owen down at the kitchen table with the seriousness the situation deserved. His eyes went to the floor the moment I started talking. Look at me, I said. He looked up. Missed at the time the thing I can see clearly now. What was on his face was not guilt. It was patience. The particular exhausted patience of someone waiting to find out whether this conversation is going to be different from all the other conversations. You want to tell me what happened? I asked. Not really. Owen, it won't matter what I say, Dad. He said it without anger, without tears, without any energy at all behind it. Just a statement of observed fact. It's already decided. Nothing is decided. Talk to me. Okay, he said. And then he said nothing else, because he had already learned, and this is the part that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. He had already learned that talking to me didn't change anything. Not when the other side had already told their version first. I thought he was being a difficult teenager. He was being a kid who had given up on being believed. The paper came in March. A Thursday evening 2 days before my run to Jacksonville. Serena set a single sheet on the table while I was finishing dinner. What's this? I asked. A financial power of attorney. She sat down across from me, relaxed, easy, nothing urgent in her posture. So I can handle bills and accounts while you're on the road. Right now, if something comes up, I have to wait for you to call back, and sometimes the window is tight. A financial power of attorney in the United States gives another person legal authority to make financial decisions on your behalf. Sign checks, access accounts, manage assets. It is a serious legal instrument. I didn't fully think through what I was looking at. I'll have Dennis look at it, I said. Of course, of course. She smiled. It's just a quality of life thing. So I can help more while you're gone. I picked up the pen. My phone rang. Ray. Early pickup on the Jacksonville run, leaving at 5 instead of 7. I walked to the hall to take the call, and when I came back 10 minutes later, the table was cleared, paper and all. We can do it when you get back, Serena said from the kitchen doorway. Sure, I said. I thought nothing of it. I know now that putting that pen back down on that table was the single luckiest thing that happened to me in 3 years. October came. The Charleston job cataloging inventory for a distribution center, 3 weeks of work, the biggest single contract I'd had all year. I started loading the truck on a Monday morning. Serena came out to the driveway smiling, and the smile was a degree or two too bright, the way a fluorescent bulb gets just before it burns out. 3 weeks, I said. Maybe less. Take your time, she said. We'll be perfectly fine here. I know you will. I hugged her. Over her shoulder, I could see Devon standing on the porch. He was grinning not at anything, just grinning the way a person grins when something they've been waiting for is finally starting. I thought he was just a kid being a kid. I know now what he was waiting for. I drove south on I-95 with country radio on low and my logbook on the dash, and that particular feeling that comes at the start of a long run, half freedom, half loneliness, neither one winning. I crossed into Georgia just before noon. Behind me, I found out later the front door had barely finished closing before things changed completely. I didn't know that yet, but in 19 days, a client dispute would freeze my contract and send me home 3 days early, and I would pull onto Marsh View Lane at 1:04 in the morning and find a thin strip of yellow light seeping under a laundry room door and the sound of a washing machine running at an hour when no one should be awake. And everything I thought I knew about my own house would need to be rebuilt from scratch. Before I show you what I found in that suitcase, comment the number 10, so I know you're still with me. Because what came next changed everything. Note this story contains fictional elements woven in for storytelling purposes. Some details may not reflect any single event. If that's not for you, it's okay to step away now. October 15th, 2024. 8:40 in the morning. Owen had left for school 20 minutes ago. I'd walked him to the door, watched him go down the front steps with his backpack, and said nothing about what we'd talked about at breakfast, because some things need to settle before you touch them again. I stood at the kitchen window until he turned the corner at the end of Marsh View Lane. Then I got out my notebook. Not a legal pad. Not a notes app. The actual small spiral notebook I carry in my left shirt pocket on every run, where I log departure times, delivery windows, weigh station numbers, anything that needs to be documented and might matter later. A truck driver lives by what he can prove. I'd been living in this house for 18 months, signing my name to things I hadn't verified. That ended this morning. A truck driver lives by his inventory. You don't assume the manifest is accurate just because someone handed it to you. You open the trailer yourself. You count the pallets. You check the weight against the paperwork. You sign your name to nothing you haven't confirmed with your own hands. I'd been signing my name to this household for 18 months. Time to open the trailer. I started in the kitchen. Junk drawer first, the universal hiding place, the place where things end up, because nobody wants to make a decision about them. 3 keys I didn't recognize. A receipt from a jewelry appraiser in Columbia, South Carolina, dated 4 months ago. I don't own jewelry. I wrote down the appraiser's name and address. Bedroom next. Serena's side of the dresser. In the back of the top drawer behind, folded scarves, 3 debit cards, none of them in Serena's name, none of them in mine. A small key on a plain ring that didn't match any lock in the house that I knew of. I photographed everything with my phone before I touched anything, the way you photograph an accident scene before you move the vehicles. Then the closet. 2 suitcases side by side tucked behind the hanging clothes. I pulled the first one out. It was heavier than a weekend bag had any business being. Going somewhere, I said to the empty room. My voice came out harder than I intended. I unzipped it on the bed. Not beach clothes, not vacation packing. Winter coats, heavy boots, enough underwear and toiletries for 4 to 6 months. The kind of packing you do when you're not planning on coming back for a while. The second suitcase had a fat envelope at the bottom, thick as a paperback, rubber-banded tight dents with what felt like cash. And underneath the envelope, a small black notebook with a worn cover, the spine cracked, like it had been opened and closed hundreds of times. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened it. The first page was a list. 7 names arranged in neat columns: age, occupation, estimated assets, marital status, family situation. The handwriting was small, precise, and entirely confident. My name was 4th. Marcus Webb, 56, long haul CDL, house paid, truck paid, life insurance verify, widowed 2021, 1 teenager manageable, no close family nearby. Next to my name, a small, neat check mark, and 1 word, active. Below my name, 2 more entries. No check marks. Just names and question marks. People who hadn't been gotten to yet. I was not the destination. I was a stop along the route. I turned the page. At the top, underlined Edna Pruitt, Nashville, Tennessee. Widowed. Assets unknown but substantial. Lonely. No local children. Looks promising. This was not a family document. This was a hunting log, and it had been sitting in a suitcase in my bedroom closet, half-packed and ready to move. I closed the notebook, put it in my shirt pocket with the logbook. Then I went to find Owen's phone. I found it behind the stock pots in the lower kitchen cabinet under a folded dish towel, placed with the specific deliberateness of something that needs to be accessible but invisible. I plugged it into the charger on the counter and waited. When the screen came back on my throat closed up so hard, I had to grip the counter with both hands. 157 school notifications, 17 missed calls from my number, and a text from a contact saved as Jordan. Dude, you okay? You haven't been at the lunch table in like 2 months. People are asking about you. My son had been unreachable to his school, to his friends, to me for months, and I had stood in this kitchen on the phone with Serena and accepted the word fine, like a man who trusts the manifest without opening the trailer. I went to the camera roll. One video, 38 seconds, shot from below the angle of someone holding a phone low and keeping it still. Devin in the backyard, standing over a bicycle. Owen's bicycle, the one he'd spent a Saturday afternoon repairing. Devin picked it up and dropped it onto the concrete. Picked it up and slammed it down hard. Once. Twice. The front wheel folded. The chain snapped and skittered across the driveway. At the end, Devin looked directly into the camera. He was smiling. Below the video in the caption field, Owen had typed a note to himself. In case Dad doesn't believe me. October 3rd. In case Dad doesn't believe me, my 16-year-old son had been building a case, alone in secret, without telling me, without asking me for help, because he had watched me take their word over his enough times that he wasn't sure I would take his word at all. I set the phone face down on the counter. I put both hands on the edge of the sink and gripped it and breathed until the feeling in my chest became something I could carry instead of something that would take the house apart. I had the notebook. I had the phone. I had the watch in my pocket and a note from the fridge and a breakfast conversation that had torn something open in me that wasn't going to close again. The next step was numbers. I had lived my whole career by numbers, miles, weights, hours, fuel costs, delivery windows. Numbers don't lie if you read them right. I needed to find out what the numbers in this house had been doing while I was on the road. And I needed to do it before anyone came home. October 15th, 2024. 10:30 in the morning. I drove to the First National branch on Bay Street, the one where Linda Marsh had been processing my deposits and answering my questions for 11 years. I parked the truck in the lot, walked in, and told her I needed 2 years of statements on every account connected to my name. Joint accounts, individual accounts, anything with my social security number attached. Linda printed 6 pages without asking why. 11 years of doing business earns you certain courtesies. You need anything else, Mr. Webb? No, I said. This is plenty. I took the pages out to my truck, spread them flat across the passenger seat, the same seat where I keep the logbook, the same seat where I'd laid out Dennis's legal documents the morning after everything came out. I got out the blue pen I use for route markings, and I started reading every line. The first 14 months were clean. Normal household expenses, fuel, groceries, the occasional repair. Then, 9 months after the wedding, a transfer appeared. $800 to an account number I didn't recognize. I kept reading. 950, 1100, 800 again, 900. The amounts varied, but the pattern was consistent, regular, unhurried, and never not once over $1,200. I knew enough about American banking regulations to understand why. The Bank Secrecy Act requires financial institutions to file a currency transaction report for cash movements over $10,000. But banks also flag unusual patterns below that threshold. $1,200 sat comfortably under the level that would trigger an automatic review. Whoever designed this transfer schedule knew exactly where the line was and built the entire operation to stay beneath it. That wasn't Serena. Serena wasn't precise enough for this. This was Gloria. I circled every transfer in blue ink, added the column twice to make sure. $47,200. 26 months. I put the pen down and sat in the cab of my truck in a bank parking lot on Bay Street and did the math I had been avoiding since I found the notebook. $47,000 is roughly 94 long-haul trips. 94 times I set my alarm for 4 in the morning. 94 times I kissed Owen on top of the head while he was still half asleep and told him I'd call that night. 94 times I started the engine and backed out of the driveway and drove 12, 14, 16 hours through the night with a thermos of gas station coffee and the radio for company. 94 times I called home from a rest stop or a truck stop or a way station and heard Serena say, "Everything's fine, Owen's fine, don't worry about us." 94 trips. I sat there for a few minutes just holding that number. Then I folded the statements along their creases, put them in my shirt pocket with the logbook and Claire's watch, and drove to the end of Marshview Lane. I knocked on the Morrisons' door at 2 in the afternoon. Earl opened it before my second knock. "Shut, Marcus," he said. His voice had something in it I couldn't immediately name, not surprise. Relief, maybe. The relief of a man who has been waiting for something overdue. "Earl, you got a few minutes?" He pulled the door fully open and stepped back without a word. Betty was already in the kitchen. The coffee was already made, 2 mugs set out on the table like they'd known I was coming before I'd known it myself. "How long have you been waiting for me to come over?" I asked. Betty set a mug in front of me, and when she looked up, her eyes were wet at the corners. "Long enough?" she said. "Way too long." Earl sat down across from me. He put both hands flat on the table the way a man does when he's about to say something he's been rehearsing. "I want to say something before I say anything else. I almost came to your door a dozen times. Betty stopped me most of them. She said it wasn't our place to get between a man and his family." He shook his head slowly. "I've decided that was wrong. I should have come over. I'm sorry for that, Marcus. I mean that." "You're here now," I said. "That's what I need. What do you have?" He reached into the drawer beside the refrigerator and pulled out a manila envelope, the kind you'd use for documents. He slid it across the table toward me. "I started in January," he said. "Betty thought I was being a busybody. I thought I was being a witness. I'm a retired cop, Marcus. I know what evidence looks like and I know what it's for. 47 photographs. Each one dated in blue ballpoint on the back in Earl's careful handwriting. Owen taking out the trash in complete darkness. The timestamp from the camera's auto display read 4:22 a.m. Owen sitting alone on the back porch steps with a bowl of food, the kitchen window glowing behind him, 5 people visible at the table inside. Owen in a short-sleeved shirt on a November morning, cold enough that Earl's own breath had fogged when he took the shot. I went through them slowly. My hands were steady. I made myself keep them steady. And then I turned over a photograph that made my hands stop completely. Owen standing outside the kitchen window, his forehead pressed against the glass, looking in. On the table inside a sheet cake, candles, Gloria's hands raised and clapping, Devon grinning with a fork. Earl's handwriting on the back, October 14th. The boy's birthday. They had his birthday cake, I said. My voice came out from somewhere far away from my body. They had his birthday cake without him. He stood there 4 minutes and 11 seconds, Earl said quietly. I timed it. Then he walked to the back steps and sat down. Betty's voice broke apart. I brought him zucchini bread. Her hand went over her mouth, then came back down, and she pushed through it. It was all I had ready in the house. It wasn't anything. And he took it, and he said, "Thank you, ma'am," like I'd given him something extraordinary. Her shoulders shook. Marcus, he thanked me for zucchini bread, the way a child thanks someone for the first kindness they've seen in weeks, because that's what it was. I went inside and cried into my dish towel for 10 minutes, and I told Earl we should have done something sooner, and he said, "I know, Betty, I know." She couldn't finish. She pressed both hands over her mouth, and her whole body shuddered with trying to hold it together. I reached across the table and put my hand over hers. "It is not your fault," I said. "Either of you. You hear me? Not your fault." Earl's jaw was working hard. His eyes were red. "He's a good kid, Marcus. Whatever they told you about him, whatever came out of that house while you were gone, he's a good kid." "I know," I said. "I know he is." I drove home 20 minutes later with 47 photographs, 6 pages of bank statements, a black notebook listing 7 names, and the specific focused anger of a man who has finished being confused about what has happened to him and is ready to do something about it. I had enough to be furious. I needed enough to finish it properly. And finishing it properly meant I needed Ray. Ray would know who to call. Ray always knew who to call. October 15th, 2024, 9:40 at night. I'd spent the 6 hours between 3 and 9 doing ordinary things with extraordinary care. Made dinner pasta, nothing that required my full attention, the kind of meal that keeps your hands busy while your head works. Helped Owen with a history assignment he'd fallen behind on. Walked through the house one more time and photographed every room exactly as it stood. Put the notebook, the bank statements, and Owen's phone in a Ziploc bag inside my own locked toolbox in the truck bed, the one nobody had a key to but me. By 9, Owen's light was off. I waited 40 minutes. Then I went out to the cab. The truck was the one place in 30 years that had always been entirely mine. No one else's seat position, no one else's radio presets, no one else's coffee cup in the holder. Just the dark and the particular quiet of a man who has made up his mind. I called Ray Kowalski. He picked up on the second ring. "No hello. You need me to drive or you need me to think," he said. 20 years of friendship teaches a person the difference between your regular calls and the ones that come at 9:40 on a Tuesday. "Both," I said. "How bad?" "Bad enough that I need Dennis." Silence. Ray and I had called Dennis exactly twice in 20 years. Dennis was not a casual phone call. "Give me the short version," Ray said. I gave it to him. 5 minutes, no editorializing. The watch. The notebook with my name 4th on a list of 7. The bank statements. The 47 photographs. The birthday cake on October 14th. The phone hidden behind the stock pots. The 38-second clip that ended with Devin looking at the camera and smiling. Ray didn't make a sound the whole time. When I finished, "Owen okay. He will be. You okay. I will be. 7 o'clock, he said. "Don't touch anything. Don't call anyone else. We'll be there at 7. A pause. "Marcus, last Christmas." Owen barely said 10 words at the table. I had a feeling something was wrong. His voice went rough. "I didn't say anything. That was wrong. I'm sorry." "Ray, you're on the phone at 9:40 on a Tuesday night. That's enough." 7 o'clock, he said, and hung up. I sat in the cab another 20 minutes. Then went inside, confirmed Owen's light was still off. I didn't sleep, but I lay still, which is the next best thing. Ray pulled in at 6:53. Dennis was already in his work clothes leather document bag on his lap. They sat down at the kitchen table without coffee, without small talk. Owen had already left for school. Dennis Kowalski, Ray's first cousin, family law and asset protection, out of Savannah, had the kind of organized mind that doesn't waste time being outraged when there's work to be done. He went through everything like a pre-op checklist. Bank statements, first, every line. The notebook, second, every page twice. The 47 photographs, third, front and back. The video, last 38 seconds, watched once, rewound, watched again. He set the phone face down and pulled off the latex gloves Ray had produced from the glove box without being asked. Gloria Voss ran the financial architecture, I said before he asked. Serena wasn't precise enough for sub-threshold transfers. Gloria set the limit. Gloria compiled the notebook. Dennis nodded once. Marcus, if you confront them directly, move this evidence without documented chain of custody, or do anything outside the legal process, the story becomes about you. What you touched. When. Whether you had the right. He looked at me steadily. Do you understand? I've been driving this road 30 years, I said. I know the difference between flooring it and burning the engine. He opened his legal pad, shot the first emergency motion to freeze the joint accounts and secondary transfer account before noon. Under South Carolina law, documented evidence of systematic financial fraud qualifies for emergency injunctive relief. A judge can freeze assets without advance notice to the other party. File by 11, order signed by 4. She finds out Sunday when her card stops working. He tapped the notebook. Second, the photographs and video are sufficient for an emergency protective order for Owen. Court-issued criminal penalties for violation. Third, this notebook goes today to a colleague in Nashville who handles elder financial abuse. If Gloria ran this same operation on Edna Pruitt, we have documented pattern evidence. In a fraud case, that's the difference between theft by deception and racketeering. Ray leaned forward. Racketeering, like organized crime. Like organized crime, Dennis said. Because that's exactly what it is. He tapped the blue-circled column on the bank statements. $47,200, he said. 26 months, I said. I'm number 4 on that list, 3 before me. Maybe more that didn't make the book. Dennis Kowalski's face, which had not moved out of professional neutral all morning, tightened. His jaw set. His eyes went hard in a way I hadn't seen before. Then let's make certain, he said, that there is no number 5. While Dennis made calls from the passenger seat of my truck, I sat behind the wheel and did what I always do before a long run. I checked my mirrors. Front, side, rear, Marshview Lane was quiet. Earl Morrison's sprinkler on the side lawn. A neighbor walking a dog. Ordinary Tuesday morning in South Carolina. But somewhere out on the Atlantic on a ship called the Caribbean Star, 5 people were posting sunset photos and sleeping off last night's drinks, absolutely certain that everything they had built was still standing. They had 36 hours left on the water. I had 36 hours on the ground. The difference was what we were each about to do with them. October 16th and 17th, 2024. While the Voss family was posting photographs of themselves at a beachside seafood buffet, tagging each other in sunset videos, and complaining about Devin's sunburn in the group chat we were working. Here is what 36 hours looks like when you use them correctly. Dennis filed the emergency motion at 11:17 Wednesday morning from the passenger seat of my truck, his laptop balanced on a legal pad phone tucked between his ear and shoulder as he confirmed the filing number with the clerk's office. An emergency motion in South Carolina Family Court requires documented evidence of ongoing financial harm, the bank statements, the transfer pattern, the notebook with its columns of targets. Dennis had all of it organized and formatted before 9. He called me at 4:47 that afternoon. "It's done," he said, and I could hear in those 2 words that he'd been waiting to say them. Judge signed the order at 4 o'clock. Joint accounts are frozen. She cannot move money in or out. The secondary transfer account, the one receiving the sub-threshold deposits, has been flagged for investigation by the South Carolina Financial Crimes Unit. "She'll know when she tries her card," I said. "Huh? She'll find out Sunday when she lands and tries to use an ATM at the cruise terminal in Charleston." A brief pause. "Right now, she's on a ship where satellite internet costs $11 a minute and runs at the speed of dial-up. She's not going to know a single thing before she's standing on dry land." I exhaled for what felt like the first time in 2 days. "What's next?" CPS. "Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. Bring Earl's photographs, the video, and Owen's written account if you can get it tonight. I'll have the protective order paperwork ready to file simultaneously." I hung up and sat at the kitchen table with Owen after dinner. I told him I needed him to write down what had happened over the past year, not everything, just the pattern. The 4 a.m. wake-ups, the floor, the midnight laundry, the phone, the birthday. He wrote 4 pages in 40 minutes. His handwriting was careful and specific and completely without self-pity, and reading it afterward was one of the harder things I have done as a parent. The Child Protective Services office on Boundary Street opened at 8. I was in the parking lot at 7:45. The intake worker was a woman named Carol who had the specific stillness of someone who has spent years listening, never have to hear. She didn't perform sympathy. She just listened and looked and processed. She went through Earl Morrison's 47 photographs without rushing. She looked at each one. She read the dates on the back. "The child is currently safe," she asked. "He's been with me since Tuesday night. He hasn't been left alone with any of them since I got home. And your documentation covers what time period? 10 months of time-stamped photographs, 2 years of financial records showing systematic transfer of household funds. 1 video 38 seconds, dated October 3rd. I paused. "And 4 pages in my son's own handwriting describing the daily pattern which I can leave with you now." Carol set down the photographs and looked at me across the desk. "Mr. Webb, I've been doing intake for 14 years. She stopped, recalibrated the professional reflex of a woman who has learned not to editorialize on the record. "I'm going to need you back here tomorrow morning with the originals of everything, not copies." "I'll be here at 7:50, I said. "The office opens at 8. "I know that," I said. "I'll be here at 7:50. Something moved at the corner of her mouth. "We'll see you then." Thursday evening, Dennis called again. I was at the kitchen table going over the transfer statements for the 3rd time when my phone buzzed, and I knew from the first word he said that something had changed. "Well, my colleague in Nashville found her," he said. "Edna Pruitt. 78 years old, lives about 20 miles outside of Nashville in a town called Hendersonville. Her granddaughter filed a formal complaint with the Tennessee Elder Abuse Registry 2 years ago. She alleged that changes to her grandmother's estate documents occurred during a period when Gloria Voss was providing what the records described as companion services. Voluntary companion services for isolated elderly individuals." His voice tightened on the phrase. "The complaint was closed for insufficient evidence of a pattern." "Until now," I said. "I overnighted a photocopy of the notebook page with Edna Pruitt's name on it. My colleague hand-delivered it this morning." Dennis paused in a way that told me he was choosing his next words carefully. Edna Pruitt held the page for about 30 seconds. Then she said, and my colleague wrote this down. Verbatim, she said, "That's Gloria's handwriting. I'd know it anywhere. She used to leave me grocery lists on my kitchen counter when I was having a hard week. She seemed like the kindest woman I'd ever met." My chest ached in a way I didn't have a clean word for. A 78-year-old woman in Tennessee sitting in her house recognizing the handwriting of someone who had stolen from her and disguised it as friendship for years. "What happened after?" I asked. She cried for a few minutes. Then she stopped crying and asked my colleague for a pen. Dennis's voice went quieter. She signed the formal complaint. Her granddaughter drove down from Knoxville to be with her, and she asked my colleague to pass along a message. A beat. She said to tell you thank you. She said she'd spent 2 years being afraid she'd imagined the whole thing, that no one was going to believe her. I put my hand flat on the kitchen table and sat there for a moment. "I tell her she didn't imagine anything," I said, "and tell her she's not alone in it." Thursday at noon, Serena texted, "Miss you, baby. Wish you were here, the water is so beautiful." I was sitting across from Dennis and his legal pad, a fresh cup of coffee between us. The protective order paperwork spread across the table. I typed back, "Sounds amazing. Is everyone having a good time?" Her reply came in 30 seconds. "Devin got so sunburned, LOL. Gloria found the most incredible seafood place last night. We're having the best time." I set the phone face down on the table. Ray looked at me from across the kitchen. "You doing all right?" "Pass me that transfer statement," I said. "I want to check the October dates one more time." He slid it across without another word. Saturday night. I sat with Owen at the kitchen table with takeout containers from the Thai place on Carteret Street. Between us and the house, quiet around us. Good quiet, the old kind. The kind that had lived here before any of this. He ate without being asked if he was hungry. He sat in his own chair without checking whether that was allowed. "Dad," he said. "Yeah." "Is it going to be okay?" I looked at my son across the table. He looked tired, the way a person looks tired when they've been tired for a long time, and they're finally somewhere safe enough to show it. "The next couple of days are going to be strange," I said. "But after that, yeah, it's going to be okay." He nodded slowly. "Then, is Mom's watch safe?" I reached into my shirt pocket and set it on the table between the takeout containers. He looked at it for a long moment. His jaw worked. He didn't reach out to touch it. Just looked the way you look at something you're not ready to hold yet, but need to know is there. "Good," he said, and picked up his fork. One more day. They were coming home Sunday, and every piece was in place. Sunday, October 20th, 2024. 2:15 in the afternoon. Owen was next door at the Morrisons. Dennis sat at the kitchen table with 2 stacks of paper-clipped documents. Ray was on the front porch with a coffee positioned where he could see the street without appearing to watch it. I was at the living room window. 30 years of long haul teaches you how to wait, not passively, but actively, holding everything steady while the situation resolves around you. Drivers who fight the wait burn out before the load arrives. I was very practiced at holding still. The rental car turned onto Marsh View Lane at 2:47. Serena was out before Frank had the engine off. Sunburned shoulders, resort tote bag, the smile of someone who had spent 5 days being looked after and expected that to continue right through the front door. "Baby." She came up the walk with her arms open. "What are you doing home? I thought Charleston wasn't finished until—" "It ended early," I said. "Come inside." Something moved across her face, quick, involuntary, a calculation she didn't mean for me to see. Gone in under a second. Hi, is everything okay? You seem... Come inside, Serena. All of you. Gloria behind Devon Frank. Behind Gloria, Darlene last with a duty-free bag laughing at something. All of them sunburned and loose-limbed, the body language of people returning from something they believed they'd earned. The laughing stopped at the door. Dennis stood up when they walked in. He had the particular stillness of a man who doesn't need to fill a room with noise to occupy it fully. Mrs. Webb, I'm Dennis Kowalski, family law and asset protection attorney representing Marcus Webb. He set the first document on the table. This is a court-issued order freezing all joint accounts and the secondary transfer account effective Wednesday, October 16th. You cannot access those funds until further court order. Serena's face moved through 3 expressions in 1 second: genuine confusion, then the performance engaging the soft eyes and chin tremble that had worked on me for 2 years, then something harder breaking through when she realized the man watching her wasn't deciding what to believe. He'd already decided nothing at all. Marcus, what is... Let him finish, I said. This is an emergency protective order covering Owen Webb issued Thursday morning. It prohibits unsupervised contact between Owen and each individual in this home. Violence. Dennis reached into the folder. And this. He placed the black notebook flat on the center of the table. The room changed. Gloria Voss looked at that notebook, the way a person looks at something they buried deep and built a life on top of. Her hand went to her throat, involuntary, the reach of someone checking for something that isn't there anymore. Where did you get that? She said, not a question. Her voice had dropped below every layer she'd spent 30 years building into it, the church warmth, the grandmother patience, the woman who remembered everyone's coffee order. What was left was Gloria Voss looking at me across her own hunting log. Left suitcase, I said. Under the envelope. She looked at me for a long moment, the actual assessment at the appraiser's eye she'd used on every target she'd ever chosen. I see, she said. I know you do, I said. Serena's voice cracked open. Marcus, please, 5 minutes. I can explain everything I can. Dennis, I said, walk them through the rest. I went to the front porch. Ray handed me a coffee without a word, black, no sugar, the way I'd taken it for 30 years. I wrapped both hands around the mug and stood at the railing. Through the door, I could hear Dennis's level voice moving through the paperwork. Serena crying real this time, I thought, though I was no longer certain I could tell the difference. Frank's voice going low, asking for a lawyer. Devon saying something, Darlene telling him to be quiet. How do you feel? Ray asked. I looked at the oak tree in the front yard, the late afternoon light in the leaves, the ordinary Sunday quiet of Marsh View Lane. Like I just delivered a load I've been carrying too long, I said. And I can finally feel my back again. Ray made a sound that was almost a laugh. At 8:50 that night, Dennis's phone buzzed on the table. Darlene, he said. I nodded. He put it on speaker. I want to cooperate. Her voice came out tight and fast, the voice of someone who has been sitting with a decision for 6 hours and needs to get the words out before she changes her mind. I want to tell you everything. I need to know what that means for me first. Dennis glanced at me. I nodded again. Cooperation is disclosed to the district attorney before any charging decision. That is not immunity. But it is documented and it matters. Do you understand? A pause long enough that I could hear her breathing on the other end. Yes, she said. Her voice broke on the single syllable. Yes. Okay. Tomorrow morning at 9? Bring your own counsel. Okay, Darlene said. Okay. The line went quiet. Owen came home at 9:30. He walked into the kitchen and stood in the doorway looking at the table, the empty chairs, Dennis's paperwork, the notebook closed in the center of everything. "Are they gone?" he said. "For tonight," I said. "Permanently soon." He crossed to his chair, the one that had been his since he was 3 years old, and sat down in it like he'd never been moved from it. "Okay," he said. "What's for dinner?" I laughed. The first real unguarded laugh I'd had in longer than I could account for. It surprised me with how much it sounded like something coming back, rather than something new. Monday, October 21st, 2024. Darlene Voss walked into the spare bedroom I'd cleared out for Dennis at 9 in the morning, with a public defender, a court-appointed attorney provided free of charge to individuals who cannot afford private counsel, walking half a step behind her. She sat down in the chair across from Dennis's temporary desk, put her hands in her lap, and started talking. She talked for 4 hours without stopping. Dennis called me at 3:15 while I was in the school pickup line waiting for Owen. "She gave us everything," he said. No preamble. The voice of a man who has just come out of something he needs to decompress from. "Everything," I said. The rotation schedule, who handled Owen on which days, how they coordinated to reset the house when you called, who was responsible for what. The financial structure account numbers the transfer schedule going back 26 months, and the name of the person who set the sub-threshold limit at $1,150. It was Gloria. Gloria designed the entire financial architecture. Darlene executed the transfers on a schedule Gloria set. I watched Owen come through the school doors, across the parking lot backpack, on looking for my truck. He spotted it, and his shoulders dropped, the specific exhale of a kid who has learned not to take his ride home for granted. "The previous targets," I said. "Edna Pruitt in Tennessee, which we already had. And a woman named Miriam Slade in Augusta, Georgia. 81 years old, widowed, living alone in the house she'd shared with her husband for 43 years. Her daughter filed a complaint 2 years ago, a will change that cut the daughter out entirely in favor of a care arrangement that dissolved shortly after the estate was settled." Dennis's voice went tight. "The complaint was dismissed for lack of pattern evidence." "Until now," I said. Until now." Darlene confirmed 4 total, including you. She believes there may be others she wasn't told about. Gloria ran each operation in a compartment. Darlene knew her own piece. She doesn't know the full scope. Owen pulled open the passenger door and climbed in. He looked at my face and said nothing, which meant he understood I was on a call that mattered. "How many years?" I asked. "That's for the DA to decide," Dennis said. But Marcus 4 confirmed victims across 3 states, documented pattern racketeering charge, a cooperating witness, a hunting log in the defendant's own handwriting, and a 78-year-old woman in Tennessee willing to testify. A pause. "Gloria Voss is going to be in a courtroom for a very long time." I hung up. Owen looked at me from the passenger seat. "Good news or bad news?" he asked. "Good," I said. "All good." Dennis called again at 4:30. His voice had a different quality this time, not the professional debrief tone, but something quieter underneath it. "Serena tried to access the joint account at an ATM in Columbia this morning," he said. "Declined. She tried a second account, the one in Myrtle Beach, at 2 o'clock. Also declined." He paused. "She purchased a one-way ticket to Miami. 6:15 flight out of Charleston International." My hand tightened on the phone so hard my knuckles ached. "She didn't make it to the gate," Dennis said. 2 Beaufort County deputies were at the security checkpoint. Her carry-on had $14,000 in cash, bundled, rubber-banded. One way to Miami, I said, with 14,000 in cash. The deputies said she told them there was a misunderstanding. A brief pause. There wasn't one. I sat down on the back porch step, the same step Owen had been sitting on in Earl's photograph, the one dated October 14th, while his birthday cake was being eaten inside. I sat there and held the phone and let the information settle into me the way information does when it confirms something you already knew but hadn't yet been able to say out loud. Marcus, Dennis started. I'm okay, I said. I'm genuinely okay. And it was true. Not the way Owen used to say it. The careful, managed okay of a person protecting someone they loved from the real answer. The actual version. The okay that means I know exactly where I am, and I can work with it. Dennis called a third time that evening at 6. Edna Pruitt's granddaughter drove down from Knoxville this afternoon, he said. They sat together in Edna's kitchen and went through everything, the notebook page, the financial pattern, the statement Darlene gave this morning. How did she take it? I asked. She cried, Dennis said. About 10 minutes. Then she blew her nose and she asked my colleague for a pen, and she signed every page of the formal complaint. His voice went quiet in a way it hadn't been all day. She said my colleague wrote this down word for word. She said, I want other people to know they're not crazy. I want them to know someone finally saw it. My throat closed. Someone finally saw it, I said. Someone finally saw it, Dennis said. I knocked on the door of the in-law suite at 7:30 that night. Frank opened it. You need to be out by 8 tomorrow morning, I said. Both of you. Dennis has made a list of everything that came into this house from outside those items you can take. Nothing else leaves. Frank's face went through the thing it did when he was looking for the version of me that could be reasoned with the version that flinched and reconsidered, and could be talked back from a position with the right combination of pressure and patience. Marcus, if we could sit down and discuss this like reasonable, we're having that conversation right now, I said. 8 o'clock. Dennis will be present for documentation. Gloria appeared in the hallway behind him. She looked at me with the specific steadiness of a woman who has been in difficult rooms before and knows how to make them feel manageable. Family works through hard things, Marcus, she said. Warm, calibrated. The register she'd been using on me for 18 months. That's what family does. You are not my family, I said. You were never my family. 8 o'clock. I pulled the door closed. Standing in the hallway outside that door, my hands were shaking. Not from fear, I knew the difference by then. Adrenaline, not fear. The shake that comes after, not before. I stood there until they steadied. Then I went to find Owen. We sat on the back porch with the October night around us, sharp and clean, the kind of South Carolina fall evening that makes the rest of the year feel worth it. What happens now? Owen asked. Courts, lawyers, time. I said. The legal system doesn't move fast, but it moves. And it'll actually do something. Darlene's full testimony, the notebook, the bank records, Edna Pruitt, Miriam Slade in Georgia. It's a pattern across 3 states, Owen. Patterns are what prosecutors build cases on. He pulled his knees to his chest and was quiet for a moment. Dad, he said. Yeah, I saved that clip because I thought you might not believe me. His voice was careful and steady, the voice of someone who has waited a long time to ask something. Was I wrong to think that? The question went into me like something sharp and clean. No, I said. You weren't wrong. I didn't always hear you the way I should have. That's something I have to carry. I looked at my son in the dark. But I'm listening now. That's not going to change. He leaned into my shoulder. We sat there until the stars were fully out over Beaufort, South Carolina, and the October air had gone from sharp to cold, and neither of us moved to go inside. What came next didn't happen in a week or a month. Courts move at their own pace, deliberate, procedural, entirely unimpressed by how urgently anyone needs them to hurry. I'd spent 30 years living by departure times and delivery windows and schedules that had consequences if you missed them. Learning to let the legal system move on its own clock was one of the harder adjustments I've made. But it moved, and here's where it landed. Dennis called me 3 months in January 2025. I was in the cab on a short run to Savannah, the first overnight I'd done since October. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "Tell me about the case," I said. He laughed, a short, real one. "Darlene's testimony covers the financial operation and the systematic treatment of Owen thoroughly and in detail. The bank records corroborate every number she gave us. Edna Pruitt's signed complaint connects Gloria to the Tennessee estate. Miriam Slade's daughter in Georgia now has sufficient pattern evidence to reopen her mother's case she filed last week." A pause. "Marcus Gloria Voss walked into the wrong man's house. She walked into a truck driver's house," I said. "Same thing," Dennis said. "Serena appeared in Beaufort County Family Court in February 2025. Her attorney argued for leniency, difficult childhood, her mother's outsized influence. She wasn't the one who designed any of it." The judge looked at the bank statements, looked at Earl's 47 photographs, looked at the picture of a 15-year-old boy with his forehead pressed against his own kitchen window on his birthday, a Ms. Voss. The judge said, "The documentation before this court reflects a level of sustained, organized premeditation that I find genuinely difficult to reconcile with a defense of mere influence." Serena looked at me once from across the courtroom. Her eyes went through the same sequence I'd seen on the porch in October, the performance engaging, then something underneath it, showing through when she realized it had no audience here either. I looked back at her and felt nothing I hadn't already finished feeling. She took a plea. 4 years. Conspiracy and financial fraud. The marriage was annulled. Not divorced, annulled, which in South Carolina law means the court has found that the marriage was void from its inception due to fraudulent inducement. It means the legal record treats the marriage as though it did not occur. Dennis explained the distinction to me in a parking lot afterward, leaning against him, very cold. "Annulled," I said. "Like it never happened." "Legally," Dennis said. "Like it never happened." "Good," I said. Gloria Voss stood before 3 judges in 3 states over the course of 2025. In Tennessee, Edna Pruitt sat in the front row of the gallery with her granddaughter beside her, clutching her purse with both hands, watching every minute of testimony with the focused attention of a woman who has waited 2 years to see something confirmed out loud. In Georgia, Miriam Slade's daughter stood at the podium during the victim impact portion of sentencing and read her statement in a voice that did not waver from the first word to the last. Victim impact statements give the people most harmed by a crime the opportunity to address the court directly, to put in the record what the crime cost them in terms no financial figure can fully cover. In South Carolina, Dennis read Owen's 4 pages into the record himself because Owen was 16, and I had asked him if he wanted to be there, and he had thought about it for a full minute and said no, he didn't need to be in the same room as her to be heard. Dennis read every word in the same measured voice he used for everything. Gloria was convicted on 19 counts across all 3 cases. Forgery, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, criminal conspiracy, racketeering. At sentencing in South Carolina, the judge set his pen down and looked at her over his reading glasses and said, "You treated other people's trust like a renewable resource. It is not." 14 years. Frank Drew 18 months at a minimum security facility in Georgia. the category of federal prison reserved for nonviolent offenders with no prior record, structured more like a supervised residential program than a traditional incarceration. He didn't contest the charge. He did his time quietly, which was the most useful thing he'd ever done. Darlene received probation and 200 hours of community service in exchange for her cooperation. She moved to North Carolina sometime in the spring. I don't know anything else about her, and I find I don't need to. Devin was placed with a distant relative in Ohio. 13 years old. I thought about that more than I expected to. He'd been raised inside the operation, the way some kids are raised inside a family business. The vocabulary, the techniques, the understanding of people as problems to be managed, all of it absorbed before he was old enough to choose whether he wanted it. That wasn't something a 13-year-old constructed on his own. I didn't forgive what he did to Owen. I'm not sure forgiveness is something I owe Devin Voss. But I held a small, deliberate space for the fact that he'd been taught, and that taught things can sometimes be untaught, and that 13 years old is young enough for that to still be possible. We repainted the kitchen in March. Owen spent 2 evenings with paint swatches spread across the table before he settled on a blue-gray called Morning Fog. "Stu, you sure?" I asked, holding it up against the wall. "It's our house," he said. "We can make it whatever we want." Ray drove down from Savannah for the weekend. Betty Morrison brought lunch both days without being asked. Sandwiches on Saturday, a full pot of soup on Sunday. Earl sat in a lawn chair in the backyard and offered opinions on the trim color that nobody solicited and everyone appreciated, including me. At the end of the second day, Owen stood in the kitchen doorway, looking at the new walls, drying his hands on a paint rag. The late afternoon light came through the window over the sink and caught the color exactly right. "Dad," he said. "Yeah. Mom would have liked this." My voice went rough at the edges, and I let it. "Yeah," I said. She really would have. By summer 2025, the house on Marshview Lane felt like itself again, in a way it hadn't since before any of this. Owen was back at the lunch table at school. Jordan, the kid who'd texted him in October, asking where he'd been, had been sitting there waiting. Owen told me about it on a Tuesday evening like it wasn't a big deal. It was a big deal. Claire's watch had been in my left shirt pocket every single day since I'd found it in Serena's nightstand. The pocket where the logbook lives, the pocket closest to where I'd carry something I needed to keep safe. Owen's 16th birthday was 3 weeks away. I'd made a promise in a hospital room on a Tuesday afternoon 4 years ago. I'd been waiting for the right moment to keep it, and now I knew what the right moment looked like. It looked like this. It looked like what we'd built back. It looked like a kitchen painted the color Claire would have chosen, and a boy who had earned every word she'd ever written down for him. It was time. October 14th, 2025. Owen's 16th birthday. I was up at 5:30, standing at the kitchen stove in the dark, with the coffee going and eggs on the pan, scrambled with cheddar and green onion, the way Claire used to make them. The way I'd made them for Owen on the morning everything came out a year ago. Some mornings you want to fill a house with the smell of something good before anyone else is awake to ask you why. Ray and Dennis arrived together at 8. Ray coming through the front door without knocking the way he'd done for 20 years. Earl and Betty Morrison were 5 minutes behind them, Betty carrying a covered dish that smelled like the coffee cake she made every time something in her life warranted one. Owen came downstairs in socks and a sweatshirt, hair going in 3 directions, and stopped at the bottom of the stairs when he saw the kitchen full. "What is this?" he said. "Jacuzzi," Earl said from his chair at the table. "Sit down before the eggs get cold." Owen looked around at all of them, Ray and Dennis with their coffee. Earl already opinionated about something, Betty setting the coffee cake on the counter with the particular satisfaction of a woman who has brought the right thing. Something moved across my son's face that I'm going to carry for the rest of my life. His eyes went bright and his jaw worked, and he pulled out his chair, the one that had always been his, and sat down in it like sitting down was an act he'd been waiting to perform. "This is what it's supposed to look like," he said quietly. Betty reached over and put her hand over his and squeezed it hard enough that her knuckles went white. "Yes, baby," she said. "It is." After breakfast, after Ray and Dennis had moved to the living room, and Earl had taken his coffee and his opinions to the back porch, I stayed at the kitchen table. Owen was clearing plates. "Leave those," I said. "Come sit down a minute." He sat across from me. The October light came through the window over the sink, the same window Owen had pressed his forehead against a year ago, looking in at a birthday that wasn't for him. The light looked different from inside. I reached into my left shirt pocket, the logbook pocket, the one closest to where I carry things that need to stay safe, and set the watch on the table between us. Owen's hands went still on the table. "Your mom wanted me to give it to you when you were ready," I said. "She didn't tell me how I'd know, but I know." He picked it up. His fingers found the case latch, the way fingers find things they've been looking for. He opened it. "For our boy, Claire." He made a sound I won't try to describe. He pressed the watch against his chest and bent forward over the table and cried the way a person cries when something has been held in long past the point where holding it in made sense. His whole body shook with it. I got up and went around the table and put my hand on his back and left it there. "She said to tell you something," I said. My voice was barely functional. "She said time is the one thing nobody can steal from you." It is. They tried," he managed. "They did," I said. "But they didn't keep it. It came home. Like everything that's really yours always comes home." He straightened up eventually, wiped his face with both palms rough fast, his mother's exact gesture, the practical refusal to let tears have the final word. "I'm going to wear it," he said. "Good. Not every day, just..." He looked at it in his hands. "On the days that count." "That's exactly right," I said. He reached into his hoodie pocket and set the shoebox on the table. Claire's notes. He'd carried it up from his room. "There are 9 left," he said. "I've been reading one every morning. I didn't tell you." "I know. Should I read them slower? Make them last." I looked at my son across the table. "Read one every day," I said. She meant every single one, all the way to the last. He put the box back in his pocket. An hour later, Ray and Dennis were loading up to head back to Savannah. I needed to move the truck out of the driveway. I got in, started the engine. 30 years of habit, check the mirrors before you move. I looked in the rear view. Owen was on the porch. Socks, sweatshirt, the watch chain just visible at his collar. He raised his hand. One slow wave, unhurried, deliberate, the exact gesture his mother had made from this same porch for 20 years. I turned off the engine, got out, walked back up the driveway. Owen watched me come. "Forget something?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "I forgot I don't have anywhere I need to be right now." He moved over on the porch steps to make room. I sat down next to him. The October light came through the oak tree the way it does in South Carolina in the fall gold, and unhurried, the kind that doesn't apologize for being exactly what it is. We sat there for a while. Neither of us said anything, and neither of us needed to. There are 9 notes left in that box. 9 mornings where Owen opens it and finds his mother's handwriting and reads the same thing she wrote him every day she was alive, and every day she knew she wouldn't be. "I'm proud of you today." I used to think of that as a countdown, a diminishing thing. I don't anymore. She wrote enough to last. She knew her son. She knew what he was going to need, and she made sure it would be there. She always knew what she was doing. She always did. I'm just a truck driver. I spent 30 years reading roads, and I almost missed the most important thing happening inside my own house. If this story taught me anything, it's this: quiet is not the same as blind. I stayed quiet too long, not because I didn't love my son, but because I was afraid of what I'd have to do if I admitted what I was seeing. Don't be like me. Don't wait for a midnight laundry pile to tell you something is wrong. Watch the small things. The chair at the end of the table. The kid who says, "I'm fine," in a voice that means the opposite. I'm not a perfect father, but I came home early enough to still matter. And I genuinely believe that God put me on that road at that hour for a reason. These grandpastories aren't just about family revenge. They're about what happens when ordinary people stop absorbing and start paying attention. This revenge story isn't one I'm proud of living through, but I'm proud of how it ended. If Owen's story stayed with you, if you've seen something like it, or lived something like it, leave a comment below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and if these grandpastories speak to you, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Every story we tell here is another family revenge worth witnessing. Thank you for staying until the end. It means more than I can say. The stories ahead contain some fictional elements crafted for educational purposes. If that's not for you, no hard feelings. Choose what feeds your soul.